Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out the range with the G36. This is a TG36 from Tommy Built, which they're currently available. HK won't produce them in the United States, so Tommy Built does. But this is the current infantry rifle of the German army. But Germany's been looking at adopting a new rifle to replace the G36, and we're going to talk about that gun here in this video. But before we get started with today's video, guys, if you enjoy the content that we produce here at the Military Arms channel, please take a moment to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Also hit that notification bell so you get notified when we post new videos. And if you would like to support us, please consider supporting us over on Patreon. There is a link in the video description below. With all that being said, let's get started with today's video and take a look at the G36, but more importantly, let's take a look at what Germany is considering as its replacement. If you guys haven't checked out Primary Arms online, please swing by and check out their website. They have all sorts of inventory that ranges from firearms to accessories, really good prices, fast shipping, outstanding customer support. If you use the code MAC and you purchase a PA branded optic or red dot sight with a magnified optic, you'll get a free scope mount with that MAC code. Or if you pick up a red dot sight or a prism sight, you'll get a free kill flash anti-reflective device. So please check out primaryarms.com. So this is the 416, or at least as close as we'll probably ever get to owning one here in the United States, because H&K will not sell it to us as American civilians because they won't sell us military configuration rifles. We got the MR556A1, which is a close relative to the 416, but it's not a 416. So if you want a 416, you have to go out and kind of build one yourself. Being the great capitalist society that we are, some entrepreneurial spirits went out there and acquired some 416s, broke them down for parts kits, and they popped up on the market, and you would have to basically piecemeal your 416 together using a number of different parts. In the case of this rifle, I have an actual MR556A1 lower, an HK lower, and on top I have a 416 upper. You'll notice that the serial numbers don't match. Out here, this is an actual 416 handguard. This is a US made barrel. And back here, this hardware is part of the MR556A1 lower. I do have a clone lower for it, but the finishes don't match. It was the Brownells lower. So I put this gun together from parts, if you will, to get the 416. Now, there are a number of different 416 versions out there. Don't hold me to this, but I think they're on like version 7 now. And as evidence of that, this is a real 416 handguard here. If you notice right here, there's two markings for an adjustable gas block that this rifle does not have. So this rifle's gone through a number of different evolutionary changes. The point, though, is that you would think it would be a pretty simple step for the Germans to just simply adopt this rifle. This thing has a lot of street cred in the military community globally. A number of nations have adopted it for military use, either in special forces or as primary infantry weapons. The United States even uses them. SOCOM uses them in a configuration much like this. The US Marine Corps adopted the IAR, which is a version of the 416. So you would think, first of all, it has a lot of testing done to it. H&K is, got lots of history with the German government, so you would think it would just be a simple process of them adopting the 416. But it wasn't that simple. The story's actually kind of convoluted and left Germany kind of in limbo with their infantry rifle. This is the Haenel CR223 being imported by B&T USA, so it's marked CR223 and BT15. The BT15 designation is what B&T obviously gave it. This gun we took a look at several years ago when we were in Germany for EWA, and it was discussed then that this gun was being considered for German military use. At that point, it hadn't won the contract. As time would go on, this gun, or a version of this gun, would actually win the German military infantry rifle contract, beating out the 416. Now, we don't know why it beat the 416. Some people say it was due to price. Others would say that it literally beat it in terms of reliability, durability, something like that. We don't really know the backstory, at least I don't. All we know is that the gun was officially announced as the winner of the trials, and then that's when the waters really started to get muddy. H&K wasn't happy with that decision, and there's a history here with Haenel and H&K, which we'll delve more into here in a minute. This is a pistol. Pistols are much easier to import into the United States because they are not subject to 922R. Our stupid laws make it very difficult to import rifles. It's much easier to import pistols. And in doing so, this can be a completely German-made gun, and it is. But there's a lot of story here that we want to share with you in this video and kind of tell you where Germany currently is with the adoption of their new military rifle. But the history between Haenel and H&K is definitely interesting. The story about the Haenel starts off with H&K. A gentleman by the name of Robert Hirt, H-I-R-T, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his last name, but Hirt was instrumental in the development of the 416 while he was employed by H&K. SIG would later come along because they wanted to develop their own version of the 416, call it the 516. They recruited Hirt, and him and another gentleman by the name of Chris Soroy would go on to develop the SIG 516 rifle. And presumably, as the story goes, SIG wanted to give Hirt the ability to make the improvements he wanted to make to the 416, but couldn't while he was employed by H&K. That's how the story goes. How true that is, I don't know. So Chris and Robert would work on this rifle together, or I'm sorry, the SIG 516 together. And then when they were done with SIG, they were recruited by Caracal to build a UAE rifle, the UAE service rifle, which is the CAR 816. Right, so the 416, the 516, and the 816. So Robert and Chris went to work for Caracal and developed that 816 rifle. So how does that relate to the Haenel that we have here? Caracal owns Haenel. Caracal, if you remember, is a UAE company, but they own the German company, Haenel. It's a subsidiary of the Caracal. So that's where things get a bit convoluted in the development of this particular firearm for the German military. So it was submitted for the German military trials. This, or a version of this gun, won those trials. And then H&K obviously appealed that decision with the German government and then went on to bring a lawsuit against Haenel for patent infringement. Well, the procurement of the MK556 for German military use stopped right there. And that's where we currently sit. Now keep in mind, this decision to stop the procurement of the Haenel rifles happened in October 9th of 2020. Now we're in October of 2021, and still Germany, the government, hasn't made a decision one way or the other on what to do with their infantry rifle. And as bureaucracies go, and Germany is a heck of a bureaucracy, this could drag on for years. So it's kind of in limbo what Germany is going to do. In the interim, they're still using the G36. Will they go with the Haenel and, just continue on with their original mission? Or will they side with H&K, which they have a long-standing relationship with, and quietly adopt the 416 and just pretend like the Haenel never happened? The BT-15 has its own features, if you will, that kind of differentiate it from the HK416, or at least the clone that I have here, the version that I have. So let's start off at the rear of the pistol and work our way forward. Now this is a pistol, so when you take it out of the box, it quite literally will come out of the box like this. No brace, no stock, just a buffer tube. Now it is set up, so let's call it SBR ready, so you can easily file a Form 1 and then be able to put any standard M4 stock on it, or you can put a brace on it, at least for now. Moving forward, we have our traditional, castle nut here. We have 2 points where a claw-style sling mount could be used on either side of the receiver. We have the forward assist. You have a B&T style pistol grip, so this would be different than the actual Haenel produced version. This is the same type of pistol grip you'd find on other B&T products out there, like their rifles that they actually sell, or pistols as it would be. It has a enlarged latch here on the charging handle, and one thing I found rather interesting, companies are starting to put inserts in where there are high wear points. On AR-15s, a wear point is the claw on the charging handle, as it pops over the aluminum receiver, will start to erode that, and over time, a lot of time, because I have some really old AR-15s and I haven't wore that slick yet, but it will start to wear that down. Now in the military, you know, these rifles are going to go from, you know, soldier to soldier to soldier, could be in service for 30 plus years. That could start to become an issue. They've actually included a metal insert here that is replaceable, so if it starts to wear itself out, you can replace that so you get that nice positive retention by the claw on the T-handle. The selector lever is identical on both sides of the firearm, as you can see. And the one thing I don't like about that is when I'm in the firing position, that is right on my first knuckle of my hand when I fire. So I have to move my grip around to keep it from grinding on that first knuckle as I fire the gun. Generally speaking, most companies make this a truncated selector lever, make it flush or a little bit smaller so it doesn't contact that knuckle, not in the case of this particular firearm. Now, much like the HK416, and this is a feature I really, really like. So right now the weapon is empty. Just put the bolt closed, put the weapon on fire, fire it. I can now, the hammer's down. Your standard AR-15 won't do this. I can put the weapon on safe. I can also charge it, and now the weapon is ready to fire. So having that ability to put the weapon on safe, even with the hammer down, is a definite bonus to me. Now moving forward, we got a standard A2 type brass deflector. We have a pick rail across the top, pretty standard stuff. We have the handguard out here that dovetails and then continues the pick rail on out. And we'll talk more about the handguard here in a minute. So we have that round A2 style forward assist, but it's kind of concave. You'll see there's reinforcements around the trigger pins. Here you'll notice, this is the polymer port cover. Here you'll notice a bolt release. I can pull this to the rear, push out on this, and it'll lock the bolt. I don't think it was intended to be used that way, but when the bolt is locked to the rear, you can insert a fresh magazine, reach up here with your firing finger, and drop the bolt. You also have a magazine release right below that. On the other side, we have a protective fence that's very pronounced around a ping pong paddle, and then we have this little foot, which we've seen on other firearms, that you can use to easily get a thumb on, so when you go to lock that bolt to the rear, you can do that by pushing down on the ping pong paddle with that extended foot, and then of course you can release it by pushing on it. What I find to be rather curious is they've gone to great length to hide this ping pong paddle so it doesn't accidentally get hit, yet over here there's no fencing or protective anything around the bolt release. Let me go ahead and pull it out. There's nothing over here protecting it. It's just sticking out so you can easily bump it and drop the bolt. So it's kind of curious why they actually put this on there. And then right below the ping pong paddle on the left-hand side, we have a mag release and then a conventional magazine release here. You'll notice the magazine well is flared, unlike on the H&K, at least the version that I have. Moving out, we've already talked about the polymer dust cover. We have a chrome bolt inside of here. Now the handguard is pretty interesting. We have two takedown pins, obviously, just like a standard AR-15. Unlike the MR556A1, it does not require a tool to take the upper and lower apart. I'll hinge it open here in a minute for you. But let's talk about the handguard. The handguard has this locking mechanism on it, and this is really kind of cool. There's a button right here you have to depress, and then you can rotate this lever down, and when you do that, the handguard just pops right off the gun. But when you lock that handguard down, it locks down really tightly. And there is no movement. I mean, it is really, really latched on there. Now, it looks like you might be able to put this on a 416, but it won't fit on the clone that I have. So it doesn't appear that it's backwards compatible with the actual HK product. So that's pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and leave this handguard off for a moment. We have a 10.5-inch barrel that is cold hammer forged, chrome lined with a 1-in-7 twist. Here's our short stroke gas piston system. And gas block, non-adjustable, self-regulating, as the B&T folks said in a TFB interview. And then out here we have a 15 by 1 millimeter thread, a European thread, and then a bird cage on the end. What's interesting about this particular gun is if you go to that TFB interview earlier in the year, when they sat down with the folks from B&T, they talked about this handguard. The folks from B&T said that they would not import it with a Keymod Handguard. Yet here it is with a Keymod Handguard. So these are some of the very first pistols to be imported into the United States. Presumably the next batch that comes in, which we haven't seen, it's been some time, will have the M-LOK rails. So that pretty much gives you all the salient points about the firearm. One other point going to those replaceable high wear components, you'll notice right here there's a screw and it's holding in a steel insert on the inside, and that's where, I'll go ahead and hinge this open. I told you I would. When these guns lock and unlock, you see that T-pin, that cam pin right there? There's a recess in the receiver that pin can rotate in when the gun cycles. The gas piston guns are particularly violent. When the piston strikes this carrier, it's not, I would say it's more violent than the direct gas impingement system. So these have a tendency to actually cause wear on that receiver at that point. Now, it's not something that's going to happen in 1,000 rounds or even 5,000 rounds, but again, these are designed for military use. 30 years later, you'll probably wind up replacing that part potentially. It's just interesting to see that they're looking at the high wear points of the gun and giving you the ability to swap those parts out down the road should you wear those parts to the point that they need replacement. While we have it open, you can see this has a buffer assembly in there. Go ahead and take the buffer spring out so you guys can see the buffer and spring. I think this is interesting to show you guys as well. Go ahead and set this buffer aside. This is the bolt and carrier out of the 416 clone that I have. This is an actual 416 bolt. This is machine gun cut bolt, and this is a carrier, and this is a German made bolt as well on this. And you'll notice that there's this safety mechanism on the firing pin that's built into the carrier. Take a look at the Haenel carrier. Spring-loaded bolt in the carrier. If you take a look at the face of the tappets, they look nearly identical. And the Haenel being chromed, it's much easier to identify. But it has that firing pin safety mechanism in it, just like the 416. So obviously there is a comparison to be drawn there. We wanted to see just how similar the two guns were, the 416 versus the Haenel CR223. So I'm going to take the bolt and carrier out of the Haenel, set it aside. This is the 416 bolt and carrier. Now what I'm doing is potentially very dangerous. Don't do this at home. I'm what you might call a trained professional. All right, we have 2 rounds loaded. We just want to test the function to see if it's actually going to cycle and work with the 416 bolt and carrier in it. 2 rounds. And even locked open. So yeah, there's a few similarities between the Haenel and the 416. So I did get a chance to speak with B&T, and the guns are, even though they're not listed on their website currently, they're still coming into the country. B&T did not originally intend to bring them in with the Keymod rails, but the first shipment that they got from Haenel did have the Keymod rail systems on them, so all future guns that come into the country will have the M-LOK rail system on them. So there might be other changes to the next batch that comes in. We don't know, but we do know that the Keymod is the first run of guns only. Future shipments are going to have that M-LOK on them. So what are these things worth? Well, MAP on these is $3,049, and Copper has a couple in stock right now for that price, but you can find them elsewhere on the internet for as much as $4,000, $4,500. Just depends on where you find them available. And yeah, is it worth that amount of money? Worth, guys, is completely subjective. At $3,000, this is much cheaper than building a clone at today's prices. We got online briefly this afternoon just to see what clone parts we're going for, and it's just outrageous. I mean, the bolts themselves, just the carriers and bolts, are like $1,000. It's, you know, just an upper is $4,000. And so the clone 416 market has just gone crazy out there. At $3,000, if you want a 416, this is a pretty solid option. The SIG 516, I don't know if it's still in production. We'll see them pop up every once in a while online for sale, but they're not readily available. I haven't seen one you know, on the distribution websites in quite some time. So if you're looking for a 416, this is about as good as it's going to get, and technically it did beat the 416 in the German military trials. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. It's a fun gun to shoot. We did do some accuracy testing with it using 55 grain Federal, just standard 223 and 556 ball. We did some 77 grain Sierra match that we shot some groups with, and it's combat accurate. I mean, it's not a matched firearm by any stretch of the imagination, but it's every bit as accurate as any other quality AR-15 I've fired that is meant to be a military type service firearm. So with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. You found the information on the Haenel informative and useful, and you enjoyed the content. If you would like to support us on our mission to continue to bring you content like this, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, got that little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Click that join button and consider supporting us here on YouTube. And last but not least, guys, please swing by and check out coppercustom.com. Thank you for 13 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.